Mini-episode 1430 of the FDH Lounge is brought to you by Sportsology, delivering unconventional columns and webcasts about sports, TV, music, movies, and more. Follow them on the web at sportsology.com.
The FDH Lounge. You'll want to schedule your life around it.
A long time ago, on a gloomy, wet Cleveland spring night, two men stand alone amidst the late-night drizzle. Their voices echo across the vacant station parking lot as they debate the merits of the great American radio show that have been missing for far too long. On that night, an idea was born. That idea became the FDH Lounge. Welcome to the FDH Lounge.
Welcome to the FDH Lounge 15th anniversary show. We'll do a quick look back at the last 15 years and a bigger look ahead to the next 15 years on a show where nothing is off topic. I am original FDH Lounge dignitary Rick Morris, and we have the same anniversary show panel as the last 2 years, plus one. We'll get to that in our introductions. The 2020 anniversary was a look back at the 2010s and ahead to the 2020s. Now that was, of course, about 11:59 p.m. before the coronavirus was widely known, so most of our predictions were moot. So 2021, we gave ourselves a mulligan, and that's why we brought back the exact same panel, because it was the folks making predictions for the decade the year before. So 2 years ago, we looked back at most of the history of this show, most of the history we've covered, but 2007 to 2009 weren't a part of that. And since we have another original dignitary on the panel, we're going to start with a look at what we might and might not have foreseen on the night that we first raised the curtain in the old Sports Talk Network studios, January 14th, 2007. 2 years ago on this anniversary show, I proclaimed that original dignitary, my old friend and fellow Ohio University Bobcat, Chris Galloway, proclaimed him our chief futurist because of his keen interest in trends and technology. It was on a trip to watch our Bobcats compete on the gridiron in the fall of '06, with Chris sharing his 50-yard line seats as he so often generously has, that we fleshed out many of the concepts for the show where nothing is off topic. He's been our lead NFL contributor the last few years and essentially the conscience of the Pantheon. That's our panel where we induct the best of the best in all walks of life into the FDH Lounge Pantheon. And by the way, my first prediction on the day is that we do another Pantheon segment in 2022. Now, these panels like this, these are essentially Pantheon adjacent. We all draw on each other's insights in all the different areas that we're looking at. I cannot imagine doing one of these without this guy, original dignitary Chris Galloway. Good to have you in, my friend.
Rick, I am thrilled as always to be here with you and the boys, and looking forward to today's episode.
It's always a lot of fun. Yeah, I know this is going to be no different. And there's a couple guys that you have done a number of these panels with. Next up is one of them. We've got a guy that I've known the longest on the panel, having attended the esteemed Valley Forge High School with him and his brother Davey, and hung out with them ever since. This guy is a participant for many years in our FantasyDraftHelp.com expert mock drafts in tennis and golf, long enough to remember a gal from a tennis website being passive-aggressive, condescending because she thought we undervalued Andy Murray that year. Now, I almost feel bad because she was a nice lady, but spoiler alert, we were right and she was wrong. This gentleman always brings the artistic perspective to any of our panels because that is right where his skill set is located. They say that a conservative is a liberal who's been mugged by reality. If so, this guy has had many such figurative muggers in the past 5 years plus. Dignitary Jon Adams. Good to have you in, my friend.
Good to be here. Good to be here discussing all the topics. Love the introduction. Appreciate it. And Pat had the answer for it. I was trying to say, sorry, Andy Murray. Yeah, good to be here.
Thanks, buddy. Yeah, we were right. She was wrong about Andy Murray. Nice lady. I almost feel bad bringing that up, but I will never cease to bring up things that are funny. Next up, we have a guy, I sometimes introduce folks like this as dignitaries before there were dignitaries. Now, this means folks I worked with at the old Sports Talk Network on shows that would be influences on what this show would become. For example, our 5th anniversary show took place with one of these guys, my friend Ken Detweiler from the old Life's a Pitch show, who recorded a panel with Chris and me. But the first of any of these dignitaries before there were dignitaries is this guy, my old friend Ron Glasenapp, who brought me back into broadcasting after a post-college hiatus. Send your hate mail to him. And the aforementioned Dave Adams and I, we replaced one of the original contrarian broadcasters, Peter Brown, on Ron's reality check show on the Sports Talk Network. For 2+ years, I got to have fun and chase greatness with these guys. It's a period that I will always remember, and on a personal level, was very instrumental in helping me heal after the passing of my mom. Ron is always the voice of reason in any room that he's in. Whenever you get together with him, always bet the over on the number of times he rolls his eyes while recounting some idiocy that he came across. He is a longtime veteran of TV and radio producing on America's North Coast. My good friend, Ron Glasenapp. How you doing, my man?
What an introduction from an OU guy to a Miami guy. I don't think I'd ever heard that before.
A little bit of kumbaya between arch rivals. Oh, my. Up next, I don't want to run afoul of any copyright, so I'm not going to pronounce this the Blue Collar Comedy Tour, but I have known my friends, the Petrones, since the mid-2000s when they had the show The Unheard Scene on the Sports Talk Network featuring bands unsigned to record labels, and I've been a part of their ventures, and they are part of this show ever since. I was once asked by original dignitary Tim Faust if Petrone Brothers was a nickname or their actual name. I said actual name because if it was a nickname based on the classiness of what they drank, they'd be the Smirnoff Brothers, but let's take them one at a time. Matt Petrone, he was to have been on our 2020 anniversary panel. He had a last-minute snag. Let's call it a young man's winter vacation. So he was not on last year's panel because it was just the same group running back our 2020's predictions. When I first found out some years ago that Matt studied photography when he was younger, I wasn't really surprised because a lot of times you can count on him to really kind of get a different perspective on whatever you're talking about. I expect more of that today from my good friend, dignitary Matt Petrone. How you doing, Matty?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me on the show, Rick. And yes, I really like photography. I took to it for a while. I kind of got away from it, and now I'm still trying to take pictures, and it does help to get a different perspective on different things. And that's what I like to do.
Well, we've always got that. Well, we're counting on that today. So the last guy up to introduce, what can be said about Anthony Petrone that hasn't already been said? He is the creator of the Unheard Scene. He's the co-producer of many great segments between that entity and this show, including his creation, the Fantasy Rock Band Draft. He's on a very short list of the hardest working guys at the old Sports Talk Network, and they call him the grandfather of the Cleveland music scene, dignitary Anthony Petrone. How you doing, Anthony?
I'm good. Wow. I guess that grandfather term took its toll overnight.
Apparently. I told you I'd work that in. I told you I'd find a way.
And I'm also a big fan of John Morant.
Yes, you are. I still remember the prospect days here. You're talking about John Morant. Nothing will be more awesome than that. So, as we're going, and I don't think we could have seen John or Ja or whatever coming on January 14th, 2007. He was a little far out on the distant horizon, but I want to start off, like I said, this will sort of be the appetizer to the main course of taking a look back at the time, because again, we've largely covered a lot of this kind of stuff, but I want to kind of lay out some big developments and see what anybody else thinks about what might or might not have been foreseeable at that time. But on January 14th, 2007, if you're looking at things, it was possible to foresee greater political division in this country because the Carter administration was the last one to really have great divisiveness within a political party. Really, ever since the 1980s, there was a brief respite after 9/11 for a few months, but ever since then, it's been pretty much steadily escalating red team versus blue team, just kind of exploding partisanship. So even the depth that it's gotten to, I don't know that would have come as a surprise 15 years ago if you were paying attention. Now, we were still several months away from the debut of the iPhone, and on that cold night, 3+ years away from the debut of the iPad, further still from the smart TV. So outside of maybe Chris, it might have been hard for a lot of people to kind of see the road to where all this kind of led us technology-wise here in January 2022. We had a historic economic crash not long after we launched the show, and one stemming from a historic pandemic sort of bookending this time period of the 15 years. Now, sports just kind of kept going and going because they were fueled by these unthinkable lots of TV money. They were proclaimed to be one of the last bastions of so-called DVR-proof programming. Same development led, however, blessedly to the smashing of Vince McMahon's monopoly in October 2019 with the launch on TNT of the great new promotion AEW. So Some things maybe we could have seen coming. A lot of things I think were probably difficult to imagine 15 years ago. Chris, as one of the guys sitting there in the studio with me that night, looking back on where we were, how much do you see of what has unfolded since that seemed kind of easy to anticipate or possible to anticipate to you?
Well, I think for me the biggest thing is the technological advancements. As you know, I pride myself on being a curious student of human history and how these things accelerate. So obviously one can't foresee all the specific gadgets and all the rest of that kind of stuff, but
right.
For me, the constant acceleration of our technology and our learning of the world and the universe around us, just marches forward and expands and gets faster and just imagine the things that we're going to learn now with the James Webb Telescope starting to unfold and making its appointed rounds to its destination, so that we can start looking literally to the beginning of the universe, looking back in time, the things we're going to discover that we don't have a clue about right now. You think about what we learned from the Hubble telescope, and what we were able to see, and it is the universe is going to open up and get a lot smaller for us very soon. It's going to be mind-boggling, I think, for a lot of people. So for me, it's just as we move forward and we get medical advances, technology advances, nanotechnology. That was something that we talked about, I know, on a show years ago. The idea that even eventually we'll be literally repairing ourselves with nanotechnology robots. I honestly don't think in the next 15 years that I think it's very possible 15 years from now we have enough advancements medically that there's even the possibility that we reach the precipice of aging itself being stopped. We're close. We're very close. And I don't think a lot of people really actually even know that. When you look at the DNA sequencing, you look at those types of things, and understanding of how we can manipulate them, CRISPR technology. We are right on the precipice of some amazing change in human development and evolution. It's 15 years from now, it may finally be upon us. So I'm not surprised that the last 15 years, who could predict every little goofy gadget, but there's 15 years from now, if we're all lucky enough to be doing this, the 30th anniversary of this, we'll look back on these 15 years and say, holy cow, I can't believe that Rick Morris is going to get to live forever. What a tragedy.
Well, tragedy's in the eye of the beholder, my man. Some people will treasure that a little bit more, though. But in looking back at the last 15 years on anything that may or may not have been foreseeable and or may have been the most instrumental developments, or even the most interesting on a personal level, does anybody have any additional kind of thoughts to add to this here as far as the road we've traveled here at the halfway point to our 30th anniversary?
I've got a question for Chris. Should we, based on what you said, should we be unsettled by this? Should we be excited about this? Are we talking about like cell replacement? What are we talking about? Like, do you find this? I guess the technology, as an aging person, I'm thrilled to know there's ways to kind of recharge, slow the process. But I guess there's this whole issue with ethical morality. But I don't know. There's people who will be unsettled by this. What would be the answer to that?
Well, I listen, John. I think it opens up a Pandora's box of all kinds of issues, and not necessarily Pandora's box in terms of from a negative standpoint. Obviously, Pandora's box is a negative connotation, but just the things that it raises, and I think you're pointing to. I don't think we should be unsettled by it. I sort of joke that I'm either going to be the last guy that dies as the scientists held the press conference to announce they figured out how humans can live forever, and I'll have just missed it by just minutes, or they will finally figure out how to stop aging, and you can stop aging with this new serum. But the problem is you can't reverse it. So if you're 25, congratulations, but Chris will be 94 and crippled, so you can live on forever, Chris, as an old crippled man. Joking aside, you already see now the understanding, even in something simple, the fact that they determined that humans, if we take your blood, John, and we start transfusing you, taking yours out and infusing in the blood of 6, 7, 8-year-old humans, you actually rejuvenate. It has an effect on you in terms of cell regeneration. You start to get the benefits that you see in a youthful person. That's why there's even, internet conspiracies now that these billionaires like Tom Cruise, they're taking children's blood and putting it in them. Hell, some of them might be. There are actually businesses in the world, in other countries, that are already trying to do this. Like you can be a 40-year-old and get, 14-year-old blood pumped into you. Obviously in unregulated places. Even something so basic like that, they're finding all these benefits that happens in terms of the aging process and the health of the people that gather, that go through a transfusion like that. And that's not even DNA modification and all the rest of that. I mean, the aging process, the reason we all age, and we now know this, is that each time cells, split and replicate and duplicate, there's errors, there's failures, they break down, right? So if you can modify that to stop the breakdown, you stop aging. It's actually conceptually not that difficult. Now, getting the cells to not err, and cancer works the same way. Cancer, we all have cancer in us. It's cells that have mutated and gone wrong. We are getting closer and closer on all of that, sort of unlocking how to stop those processes. And so, to your question, what does that mean? Well, we already know that the human population in this world is going to peak sometime around 2040, 2050 and start to shrink. That's happening. The UN is finally, after several years of being shown failures in their own population tables, that in fact humans are probably going to start shrinking so rapidly as a species on this planet that we run the risk in 200-300 years of being down to just a few million people on the planet. So what does that mean for us if everybody can live forever, or at least the aging process becomes one that's so manageable? Well, societally, you're going to have to make some decisions, right? You're probably going to see governments trying to get more involved in who's born, when you can have children, when you can't, to manage population levels. If everybody's living forever, right? Then you run a risk of overpopulation. So there's a lot of societal, economic fallout from something like that that I don't think we can even fully grasp at this point, and how it changes how we operate society. And I think that'll be the biggest challenge, to your point, if we ever fully reach that point, that they're going to have to figure out. There's going to have to be some societal construct that says, we've got to manage it. So, that's a whole other ball of wax in terms of, where are we going as a human species and within our cultures. So,
Well, that's a lot to think about, and clearly you're going to have, I know, a lot more of that when we get to the next 15 years. And there's a reason that I'm holding you for last on that, Chris, because I'm not going to make anybody follow that. I certainly would not want to, as far as my predictions for the next 15 years. Before we start getting into that and things that we're looking ahead to, anybody else got any other kind of thoughts about the road travel to, as I say, the halfway point to our 30th anniversary? Alrighty then, that appears to be a no. So, in looking ahead to the next 15 years, I will go first. I'll get mine out of the way. And it's just kind of basic on my part. I was kind of looking ahead. I was kind of hoping I could be a little bit more creative as far as anticipating inventions and everything. And I'm always notorious on shows like this for bemoaning the fact that science has failed us and not given us a jetpack. I'm impatient to get that jetpack and be able to travel that way, but science is apparently sleeping on the job. So I'm going to go back to what I said 2 years ago in my predictions for the 2020s, and I'm going to extend this out to 2037. And I was the sort of token dystopian of the group, the doom and gloom guy. And 2 years in, boy, of all the things you don't want to be right about, but I've been closest to the mark when you look at the last 2 years, because 20% of the way through the 2020s, it has been nothing but shite thus far. And I don't know if there's any reason to expect that to change over the next 15 years. Let's look at some of the things I was talking about then. Much greater divisiveness, wars, assassinations. Haven't seen any major wars yet, but give it time. Looks like Russia and or China could be on the verge of starting something in various places. Major assassinations. Hasn't happened, at least domestically, but as much as I hate to say it, the way things are going, give it time. Economic doom. I didn't foresee the return of serious inflation after 40 plus years. I didn't see that specifically, but you got a thing like the national debt. I knew that was going to be bad, and that's going to be bad in the sense of making it harder to fight inflation. So it's going to be a tough way out of this. We had a pretty serious recession in the early 80s when the Fed was trying to clamp down on inflation the last time, and that's what it might take this time around. I mean, I hope not, but I don't see too many ways of dealing with it. I will say also on climate change, which I got to admit, I don't mean to damage any of Chris's street cred, but Chris was one of the guys who kind of, convinced me that yes, to at least some degree, there probably is something happening here in this way. And it's not always as easy for guys on Chris's and my side of the political spectrum to cop to that. But I do at this point, I guess I've seen enough, evidence to acknowledge some reality there. But I fear the cure as much as the disease, because throttling back economic growth, everything you do to try and get rid of fossil fuels before we're ready to do so, that's part of the problems that we're having right now economically, is going too far in that direction, throttling back growth. I'm afraid that's only going to get worse over a period of time. What we have seen over the last couple of years is a little bit of, for the first time, sort of a backlash against the whole woke movement. And I do think that is going to continue over a period of time. And I've had many, many friends who've been largely apolitical who seem to have been troubled by the whole woke movement over a period of time. But the woke people are digging in their heels. So ultimately, that's just going to lead to more divisiveness as that happens there. And like I said, I tried to anticipate any kind of technology stuff. But, there is, of course, the Internet of Things that they keep saying is coming with 5G and driverless cars. I think those are going to be fairly predominant by 2037, if not all over the road. Maybe it'll just be driverless cars by then. I don't know. But my crystal ball was kind of foggy when it came to that stuff. But as far as just kind of general doom and gloom, unfortunately, my crystal ball is always clear when I see that kind of depressing stuff. So I deliberately tried to get all the depressing stuff out of the way at the outset. That if anyone would like to jump in and disabuse me and tell me, no, Rick, it may not be as bad as that, please feel free.
Hey, Rick. As far as the technology thing goes, I just got a new smartphone, and I don't think I'll even be able to figure out how to use it before I get my next one. So the technology is always going to change. And as far as the driverless cars, I think you're right on that. I think that's going to happen, as scary as it sounds, because, now you can blame it on the car instead of your own stupidity. But at the same point, it might be safer, If we all have driverless cars, and the cars all automatically do the speed limit, and the cars automatically know what to do, and you don't have to do anything but sit there. So it might be safer. But then again, it might be scary.
You know what, Matt? Well, I hate to be a contrarian here, but let me just say this. Everybody's going to hate me for pointing this out. Safer until they get hacked by people looking to start mass accidents?
Yeah, I don't know how much of a movie fan you are, but on one of the Fast and Furious movies, they hacked every car with a smart chip, and they made it literally rain cars. They took every car in the city of New York and turned it into a ghost driver just to take out the one. I mean, I'm not saying that can happen. I'm not saying that can't happen. It's scary to know that technology is out there, and if they're coming up with it for movies, why can't they come up with it in real life? And what's to stop it from happening?
So essentially, Hollywood has already said, hey, hackers, here's some stuff you can do to cause mass chaos in the future.
Exactly.
Thanks, Hollywood.
Yeah, and I would add to that and say, Rick, I think you're right about that. In fact, I think we will reach a point where if you want to drive you're going to need some level of a special licensure that they will make it so that driverless cars interconnected with each other are the norm. And if you, Rick Morris, say, hey, I've got my, my 73 Cutlass, you're going to have to get a lot of special insurance and licensure and approval to actually go out on the road. And they may even limit you where you can actually drive it yourself. I think that's the more likely future, point 20, 25 years off in the distance. It won't be a function of driverless cars being the oddity. The guy actually doing it himself, the flawed human, will be the oddity.
I'm going to push back a bit. I do think there will be some form of driverless car. I think that's going to be more constrained in terms of maybe big cities. This country just isn't set up for widespread. I think about the electric vehicles. Okay, well, try driving to like the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and then you're really going to find just the logistics of making a long road trip in an all-electric vehicle, especially with the charge time. You pull into a gas station, 10 minutes later, you're back on the road, or less. You gas up and go. I do see the driverless cars starting with like your Amazon deliveries, those type of things, and then maybe in big cities. The other piece is, there's a generation of people, and obviously we're dying out. We're some of the last people that will remember life without a cell phone, but there will be people that always want to drive, physically drive. I enjoy it. It's freedom to get out. You take a drive somewhere, and maybe that'll go away, and that'll eventually become, something like Ready Player One, that movie that's where you're in your own house and you're just doing all these things. You're not going anywhere. I'm not sure where that'll go, but I just think there's always going to be people that enjoy driving. So we'll see. I'm hopeful for some of the technology. I've driven a hybrid. I like it. I don't know if I'd be ready to make that jump to all electric, and certainly not ready to do a driverless car because I kind of like that control. But that's just me.
John, it's the generation before us would say, "Hey, people will never stop working. People like to work." Yeah, well, look at the current generation. Right. And as far as the electric thing goes, it's really an infrastructure thing that will happen very rapidly. It's already there. Gas stations are just going to start having electric units at them. So they're already, the where they're going to be is there. If you look back in the first few years of automobiles, there were very few gas stations in the country. I mean, very, very few. And within like 5 years between Standard Oil and Ford, they made sure there were gas stations everywhere. So I assure you, you're going to see a boom in electric charging station development in around the country. There's going to be tens of thousands of them in the next couple of years. They're going to come up everywhere. That's what you're talking about. Casting up and going. That's a cultural lifestyle change, right? Until they figure out the technology to let you charge up like instantly, people are going to they're going to plan their lives a little different in terms of how they road trip. That is true, And
I wonder if it'll be almost Back to the Future, right? You think about Route 66. You went along and you drove and stayed, and maybe that might be something really interesting. Maybe that's kind of the on the road, get out there, see America. Now that could be a good outcome, I believe, where you're kind of out there, and maybe it is, hey, bed and breakfast, charge overnight, get yourself some breakfast, and then head on. So that's really interesting, and that might be just a silver lining. And not that it's a bad outcome. I shouldn't say that. I don't want to vilify electric cars, and I think we do need to find something more sustainable. So that's true, but I do think that's going to be really interesting. So
I had a comment there. I had a comment there on the driverless cars at the Amazon. I just kind of had a quick joke, kind of funny. Okay, the driverless Amazon cars, now they got a catapult. They just slingshot your stuff to the front porch. Anyway.
Nice. Better than drones, buddy. Better than drones.
My only issue on the driverless cars is how do you program them? Because a car that drives in Ohio is going to be different than a car that drives in California because it's going to have to detect the smell and realize that there's going to be some events where you need to slow down.
True. Yeah. That's a good point. I don't think I've heard anybody raise that before.
I like Matt's comment with the catapult and the drones. There's a great episode, and I'm kind of a sci-fi nerd, of course, but there's a great episode of the X-Files in their final season, which was either 10 or 11. I think it was 11. And they did the entire episode based on technology. Drones were involved in tipping and robots. Chris, you would, I think, get a charge out of it just from the standpoint of it kind of gives a flash forward of the way things could be at some points with restaurants or what have you. So just something to consider.
And if any of you haven't had the opportunity, I had this the other night, go sit in a Tesla. It was amazing. The person that I was with, she was so happy to show me that her car could play Trans-Siberian Orchestra with the lights and the flashing and the whatever outside the car, just in a Tesla. I went, wow. We sat in it. It was like sitting in an arcade. There's Tempest going on the giant monitors and whatever else. It's amazing what Elon Musk is thinking of. I can only imagine what the next generation is thinking of after that. Wow, I never heard that before. That's pretty wild. I will say too, on the whole thing about phasing out older cars, as come up a few minutes ago here. Again, when I'm able to hit a next level here and live the dream of getting a 75 lime green town car restored, they will pry that from my cold dead hands. I'll tell you. I refer everybody to the lyrics of Red Barchetta. If anybody thinks I'm ever going to give that sucker up when I get it, so there is that. There are those of us that aren't going to want to give up the treasures that we do have at that point in time. But
can I jump in real quick? I just have a question for the group. If anyone researched, I know this whole demand for cars and the supply and demand here. Has anyone researched like buying a car or anything with my own perspective is I can just see this happening where car dealerships, say, lost so much money because of, supply and demand. But I wonder if going forward, the only way to get a car is you are ordering and you've got no negotiating power. I think the days of going in and negotiating, beating up the salesman, those are over. I think it's almost you'll just have to put an order in for a car to get what you want. And then maybe you built to order. I don't know. Just thoughts?
We're already there. I mean, with the chip shortages and stuff, look at what it's like getting a car now. I mean, I know people that are buying and getting on waiting lists. I think we're already there. I'm not sure it's ever going to go back completely to where it was.
There is no haggling anywhere anymore. You can't even haggle with the flea market. Why would they let you haggle with the car dealership anymore?
Guys, you can do that now. If you go up off 422, there is a car vending machine that you order your car.
Yeah.
Going in that car and you get the car.
Yeah, I know in talking to dealership people, I wonder about dealerships themselves, their status, because, they have fought, like even in places like Ohio, the lobbyists fought allowing Tesla to direct sell cars. Ohio law, because of the lobbying efforts, was built so that to protect the dealerships. So they were trying to force Tesla to have dealerships, like under the traditional Detroit model. I can tell you the big auto companies, they want to get rid of dealerships, man. They're sick and tired of having to deal with and negotiate with local Joe Bag of Donuts who owns that Chevy dealership. They want to go to build on demand. Here's the price. We'll deliver it to you. I think that there's just no way past that. I think you're going to see dealerships become more and more rare. They'll be forcing them out. They'll be looking to sort of make them just local corporate-owned service points. And also you see this now in the auto industry. Tesla came up. You've got Fisker still out there trying to launch. You've got that new the Motor Trend Truck of the Year is an electric pickup by a company that's never had a car. What's it called? Rivian, right? Rivian. You look it up as a Truck of the Year for 2022. And I actually, driving in New Hampshire, drove past one on I-90. First time I ever saw one in the wild. It was chugging along, and I passed it, and I looked. I told my daughter, I go, look, it's one of those brand new. You've never even seen one. I wonder if we're almost going to even get to the early days of automobile manufacturing, where there weren't the big three or whatnot. There were dozens, hundreds. I mean, there was a point in the early 20th century you could buy a Galloway, made in Scotland. I mean, you could buy a car. There were so many manufacturers of them. I just think because they're becoming less about internal combustible engines and more just computers with wheels, just about anybody can build a damn car at this point. I mean, it's if you think about it, the amount of parts involved now are getting less and less. You've got a computer, a monitor, some basic steering. It's not hard to build a car now. So I wouldn't be surprised if we go back to where we started in automobiles, where we've got, hundreds of car companies, and somebody's making a specialized one that, they make 100 cars a year. You don't even know who the hell they are. Possible.
If that's the case, I'm telling you, I want to see bootleg names out there. What are you driving? It's a Scutless. I want to see more of that kind of stuff.
To that extent, that yes, if you go to different car museums, Anthony and I went to the Pierce Arrow Museum in Buffalo. I don't know if I'm allowed to say names or not, but we found
Go ahead.
different cars. Like, for example, the Playboy. There was a car made in Buffalo named the Playboy. There was 87 of them made, I believe. But that was where the Playboy empire came from. Hugh Hefner bought one of those cars, and there were so many different makes and models of cars that were in that museum that I have never heard of. I mean, an electric car in 1902. I can show you a picture of it if you want. They said electric cars were made for women. The technology's been around, but everybody had their own. And I think you're right on that, where there's going to be a lot more different car companies, because the big three are coming up with just SUVs and trucks. Cars are taking a side path, I guess you could say, where how many cars does Chevy actually make anymore? How many cars does Ford actually make anymore? Okay, Dodge has Challenger and Charger, but they're not making cars, and people still like cars. It's just they're not making them as much anymore.
Well, so that's a chicken and egg thing, right? I mean, you say people like cars. No, they don't. I mean, if they did, they'd make them. People's taste have shifted. My Cadillac is the only car Cadillac makes now. It's a CT5. That's it. It's a mid-size, smaller, sporty. Everything else Cadillac makes is a truck. Did anybody make the point that Cadillac only made one car, and it was a medium-sized car? It's bizarre.
The only car Ford makes anymore is the Mustang. The only car Chevy makes anymore is the Camaro. Or the Corvette. And that's, okay, I like cars. You're not going to get your GTO anymore. You're not going to get your Trans Am anymore. You're not going to get those anymore. And that's just I think kind of wrong. But that's where you're going to get, like you were saying, 50 different automakers out there that somebody's going to say, yeah, I still want a car, and make it themselves and then start selling it.
In a broad kind of a way, I think this actually probably carries over to a lot of the things that we're going to be looking at here. I think maybe you could say in a lot of different ways that the future is niche. It's going to be different things here. People who like cars, people who like this kinds of things. And you're going to just find smaller niches as opposed to larger, mass commodity type things. I wouldn't be surprised if you saw that in many of the areas of life in the next 15 years.